Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inspiration Shelf. I'm Glenda Bailey-Mershon. Today we have with us Tamara Kaye Sellman, whom I first met many years ago in a writers group in Illinois. But since then, she's moved to the Seattle area, and I live in the Carolinas, so we don't get to see each other very often at all. No, no. Nevertheless, I've tried to keep up with her career, and she has one book of poetry out and many things in print, but she has a new book coming out as well. That new book is Cul De Sac Stories, which will be out in 2024 from Aqueduct Press anytime now. And we'll be bringing you a cover and a brief review as soon as we get one. She also is the author of Intention Tremor, a hybrid collection from Moonpath Press, which came out in 2021, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things she's done lately that I thought was great fun was she directed and produced the short poetry film called Look Up, which appears at the I'm not sure I'm going to get this right, so I have to look at it, WRPN Women's International Film Festival in summer 2024. I'm really excited to get a chance to see that. One of the things that I think is most admirable about Tamara is that she writes across a broad spectrum of form: poetry, fiction, nonfiction, plays, scripts, journalism, and across genres: speculative, literary, and experimental. Her work has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and several other prizes. She's currently at work, I hear, on two speculative novels, a Pacific Northwest Gothic speculative poetry collection. I know some people are going to be really excited about that. Some two-minute plays with supernatural themes, and more experimental poetry films. She's the other half of the podcast Beneath the Rain Shadow with horror cohort Clay Vermoom. Is that how we pronounce his name? Vermoom?
Pretty close. Vermont. Yeah.
Vermoom. Thank you.
hmm
Can
hmm
find Tamara at one of the cleverest website names I know, rhymeswithcamera.com. Welcome, Tamara.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Glenda. It's funny because I picked that name because that's what I say to people. It's like it rhymes with camera. And now I'm actually making films and I do a lot of photography and social media. And, it's kind of funny how the camera is starting to inch its way into my persona. It was almost like I knew it was there all along.
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, that's so many things presage what's coming for us.
I'm
Things
telling you. So,
always
yeah.
puzzling, don't they?
Yeah. So,
Let's
you,
talk for a minute about where you live because I'm
yeah.
fascinated by that area, having never been there. I don't
You've
know
got
why
to
they
get out of
do.
here.
I know,
Yes.
but tell me about
So,
where you live.
yeah, I moved back to Seattle and the Seattle area, and I'm from mostly the Northwest. I moved around a lot as a kid, but mostly lived in the Portland and Seattle areas. And so now we're up in, um, I'm in Kingston, Washington, which is a ferry ride across the Puget Sound from Seattle. So I live in a ferry town, which is just, I've been living in fairy towns now for, for over 20 years now. That's kind of interesting. It's a different life. The last town I lived in was an island too, so there's that. But it's like you're a boat ride away from the city. Seattle's a big enough city. It's not like Chicago, say, but it's a big enough city to feel like you're in an urban space, which I kind of love. I actually love the grind and the pulse of a city. I love that about Chicago. And but then I could come home and it is pure dark outside. There are frogs crawling from, crying from the pond nearby. There are owls, there's bobcats, there, I live in the trees. So I have a little bit of the best of both worlds. I love Chicago for so many things, so many things, the culture and the people and just the exposure to so many wonderful creative energies. But I don't really like the weather so much. It's a little too extreme for me. So living here is great, although it changes in weather, are true for this part of the country too. We get our wildfire seasons now that we never used to have. But I love living here. I'm surrounded by green, I'm surrounded by trees and plants and birds and rain. But also sun, a lot of sun in the summer, and I just love it. I mean, 100 paces literally from my front door is a trail system, and then I can go anywhere. And I often do walk right into town, and I could walk to the ferry over the hill using the trails if I wanted to. So
Mm.
it's yeah, I love it here. It's
It
just I
sounds,
love it here.
really sounds very ideal. I can imagine. Being able to ride a ferry anywhere would be wonderful to me since I love boats.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's fun. It's fun to be out on the water. And the last time I rode, fishing season is happening, the salmon are running. So I was able to, I checked out all the boats were out there. I did see someone who must be training for some kind of Ironman who was literally out swimming in the beach off of Edmonds without a shirt or anything, no dry suit or anything. It was crazy. I mean, it
Yeah.
was only like not even 50 degrees out air temperature. So you got to know the water's really cold. And he was out there swimming. He's got his little, those guys, they are women too. They trail a floaty behind them, for whatever reason. And so you could see them out there with this orca floaty. Like, this is crazy. But this is the Northwest. People are pretty hardy up here. So,
Yes, I imagine so. Well, since you've been back, do you think the area has had some impact on your work?
oh, so much. And I have to say, when I was living in Chicago, I missed the Northwest so much that a lot of my writing took me there anyway. And so coming back was definitely a homecoming for me. And I mean, this is still more than 25 years ago, really. Um, but yeah, absolutely. I'm finding to me, the landscape and the environment, it's just such an rich and important part of not only the landscape, but my identity as a human being because I spend so much time immersed in it. To me, the landscape in my writing is a character. It's not just a setting. It is like a living, breathing thing. I wouldn't say thing, an entity, an energy, right? So yeah. And as you know, I'm out there not only as a hiker and I do like to kayak too, but also in camp, but also as a gardener. And so I've evolved a little bit with that too. As you know, I'm always taking pictures of my garden and, sharing, look what I did and whatever. And sometimes I'll show you some things I didn't do right and mistakes because that's what gardening is. It's nothing but
Oh, that's fun.
mistakes, experimenting. And actually, it's been such a healing experience for me, especially living here because the last house I lived in was right in the woods and there's really not a lot of place to do intensive gardening of any kind, permaculture even. It was just really tight and wooded, which was beautiful in its own way. I'm not complaining. But living here, I have the southern exposure side yard that is
Wow.
just perfect for growing all the things. And so I've just really expanded and experimented a lot and am learning so much. And last year I took on a rewilding section in the corner of my yard, which kind of ties into the theme of one of my novels.
Mm.
And so I'm finding when I'm gardening, I do a lot of thinking about my stories and my characters and their situations, and all of that stuff just ends up in my writing, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Um,
Yeah.
it also seems to me, but correct me if I'm wrong, that the Northwest is kind of a hotbed for speculative fiction. I mean, it has been for a
Sure.
long time, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
seems like it. Yeah, it seems like it. There's definitely a rich community of speculative fiction writers here. Ursula K. Le Guin's from Portland, and that's
Yeah,
one.
sure.
That's a one
Mhm.
right there. Um, yeah, there's a lot of horror writers, there's a lot of science fiction and fantasy writers. I'm actually heading out to Norwestcon next week, which is a big science fiction and fantasy convention. And they have a speculative film festival that I was actually part of the screening for. Helped screen the films for that, so that'll be fun. Um, yeah, I think we live in this landscape. I mean, we have things like Portlandia out there and Twin Peaks, which is maybe set in Alaska, but it kind of can cross pollinate down to the lower part of the United States into the Northwest. And what is the other one? Twin Peaks. These are all like really kind of oddball kind of characterizations of the Northwest. And they're sort of maybe a little over the top, but not too much. It's kind of a quirky place we live in out here. And maybe it's the moss between the toes or all the rain or whatever. But we do have our own sort of gothic qualities, you know.
Mm,
Things are weird. We have our own cryptids. We have you know, strange but true stories.
yes.
And maybe also the influence of Native American, you know, the folks that are all around here whose land we're living on, by the way.
Mhm.
Um, their influence is really amazing. That's another thing I really love about living here is just the exposure to Native American culture. It's just like beautiful. And Chief Seattle, his grave's right down the road from here, and that's a
Mm,
sacred space to me. So yeah,
amazing. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, I think Kurt Vonnegut comes from that area, for example, and a lot
yeah.
of us started out
I think
reading Vonnegut, probably.
yeah, I've read some Vonnegut. I actually met him once. I met him in Chicago.
Ah,
Yeah,
interesting there.
I met him, and I was pregnant. And I went up to the mic to speak to ask him a question, and he made some kind of comment that was a little bit maybe not very nice. I mean, not mean, but like kind of a little like ew, kind of cringy, like because something about the female pregnant figure being beautiful, but maybe not, maybe a
Well,
little bit
okay.
more crass than that. But you know, he's an old man, whatever. And so I took it as like, okay, well, Kurt Vonnegut.
Well, we might have to give him a pass. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know,
My friend
but
Karen Gusoff Sumption also lives out there, and I think that hopefully she'll be following you with
oh,
some of her new work on here too. But
oh,
she's
good.
been involved with Clarion West, and
Clarion West, yes, that's a huge. All of my friends want to get in there. I wanted to get in there. I have wanted to, but it's like a 6 week thing where you're gone for 6 weeks, and I've just never
yeah.
been able to be away. I mean, I'm a gardener. I can't leave my house in the summer for 6 weeks. I just can't. It's not going to happen.
Oh
So
yeah, I
my
get
little
that.
baby, yeah, my babies out in the yard are going to be always going to be more important than that. So I have taken some of their like standalone things, and I've met some really amazing people like Nisi Shaw. Nishi Shaw right here in right here in Seattle as well. Cat Rambo's here. Oh my gosh, there's actually more than I can even imagine right now. I can't even think on the spot, but we have a lot of really amazing science fiction and fantasy writers
I
right
think,
here. And
and I'm noting that because we don't really have that in the South. We do have, of course, Southern Gothic,
yeah,
but not as big on speculative and science fiction. I'm not saying that there aren't any here, but that it's just
yeah,
not as major a strain here. So
yeah.
I've always been interested in watching that in the Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. It just captures. I mean, the thing about speculative, um, is that for me, it's the literature of ideas, right? And the Northwest is not short on that. I mean, we have a lot of, there's some educated folks up here. I mean, they are everywhere, of course, but we've got, you know, tech companies, and we've got some great colleges. And so speculative fiction is really this literature of ideas, about what if, the big question, what if? And it kind of is the umbrella for horror and science fiction, fantasy. It could be magical realism, it could be surrealism, it could be all these sort of different kinds of writing that are not straight up realism, you
Mhm.
know, set in the real world. Could be urban fantasy, it could be so many things. Neo noir is a new one now. So but it
Yeah.
really attracts and holds space for alternative voices and visions. And that's always the way I've been. I mean, I was totally inspired as a kid by Ray Bradbury, for instance. Margaret Atwood also. I mean, I read Handmaid's Tale when I was 18 years old. And so that's a huge book and totally, you know, influenced so much of who I am as a human being. And I'm a huge Margaret Atwood fan. Also read tons of Ursula. Um, and there are others too, but Stephen King, but I feel like speculative fiction often kind of has a dark element to it that I'm really attracted to. I really like apocalypse stories. I really like dystopic stories. I love Franz Kafka. I love Albert Camus. I mean, I really like things that are kind of digging down into the mud a little bit, and or pointing out imbalances in the world.
Mhm.
But I also think of speculative fiction as being always at the very end of the day hopeful, that there's a reason why we're writing and talking about these not so great things, because there's always at the end of the story a glimmer of hope, even if it doesn't feel very hopeful. I think of On the Beach by Neville Shute. That's a really
Mhm.
devastating nuclear fallout, nuclear war novel from the 60s,
Yeah.
50s or 60s. And it's really depressing. And yet I found it hopeful. I found it hopeful because just calling it out and showing and exploring the human, you know, the mistakes we can make as human beings and where that might take us gives me hope that we can maybe stop that. So I think that this kind of literature really pushes boundaries. Um, and I find there's hope in the dystope.
That's a fun way to put it. Um, well, it's interesting for me to watch that not being. I write magical realism often, but I don't really write much speculative fiction. Now and then some corner of it attracts me.
Yeah.
It seems to me some days that everything is very dystopian right now. If I turn on the television, it's
Yeah.
all visions of the world gone wrong. And I
Yeah.
suppose that's how lots of us feel right now. So
Mm.
tell me about the new collection of stories, Cul De Sac Stories, which are speculative, I think.
Yes, they are. They are. And it's a little buffet. A
Aha.
little bit of this and a little bit of that. You can just have a little bit of everything. The book is called Cul De Sac Stories, and the title comes from the idea of cul-de-sacs, which were invented when there was, urban sprawl, suburban sprawl, right? Where all these subdivisions were built back in the 50s. That was the new way of being in the United States, right? And so you built all these tracts of housing everywhere. And then there was a thought that if we build houses around these little bubbles, these cul-de-sacs, that creates this,
Hmm.
modicum of safety, that those are safer spaces because they're dead ends. But listen right there, what does the term dead end imply? So to me, a cul-de-sac, I mean, it's not even to me, there has been research has shown that cul-de-sacs really don't improve the safety of a neighborhood. In fact, they sometimes make it easier for crime to take place or bad
Mm.
things to happen. So cul-de-sac really is kind of calling out the lie of safety in our culture. And these stories in particular are framed around maiden, mother, crone kinds of themes. So there are women in every story, women and mothers and children and grandmothers, um, in all kinds of various, you know, um, ways. And so, yeah, there's definitely a feminist bent. It's all about, maneuvering through patriarchy, and how to be safe in the space that we're living in right now. Almost all the stories are set in the present. There's one that's set in sort of an uncertain past, maybe medieval, maybe not. It's kind of weird, but it's actually based on the images that came from the raising of the Saddam Hussein statue back in April 9th, 20, what was it year? I can't remember now. 2000, what year is that? 2003, I think.
Yeah, somewhere
Yeah,
early on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Early, yeah. So I was sitting there watching that on TV with my, 5-year-old child in my lap, just like, and it was so compelling. That those years were really rough for me as a mother. I had young children, and this is the world we're in post September 11th. And so I was keeping journals and writing things to my children.
Mm.
And that story actually came out of that. It ends up being a fairy tale, about kind of borrowing from the imagery from that, but it's not about Saddam Hussein at all. So you'll have to read it. It's called April 9th. You'll have to read it.
Wow. I can't
Yeah.
wait to
So
read it.
yeah, and it's coming definitely from the frame of a woman's perspective, for sure, a mother's perspective. I have to say, I really want to thank Aqueduct Press for publishing this book. These are short stories from, years and years of different writing that I've done, that I've experimented with, and they saw the vision that I had, and the book they're putting together, I'm just so excited about. I'm really happy with the cover image. I'm happy they're illustrating each of the stories with images that they look fantastic, and it's just super fun to have this collection of my own work between two covers. I have more, and I'm going to keep doing it, but I really wrote all these stories not to put them in a collection. They're all just separate pieces for separate inspirations, and they just all kind of came together. I also have to thank Elizabeth Thorpe, a really good friend of mine who was also served as an editor and a developmental editor, and helped me kind of put this collection together. So
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, I'm super excited. There are horror stories in there. There are magical realist stories in there. There are dystopian post-apocalypse stories in there. There's a couple that are very realistic, but in a very weird way. One of them is a story that was previously published, and by the editor was Karen Joy Fowler. So I'm really proud of that link because she picked my story for her
Yeah.
collection. So
Cool.
that's super cool. There's an author, right, that would know a thing or two about speculative writing. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey for this book. And we just sent it off to press, the print version. Yay. And that it'll
Exciting.
be available July 15th of this
Oh,
year. And
okay.
then we are now working on the ebook version. And I don't know when I'm going to be doing readings. We're still working on the promotions for that, but I'm looking so forward to it. This is really the first promotion for it, so thank you.
It's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, if you come our way, let us know. Or if you
Oh,
want to come our way, let us know and
yeah.
we'll do what we can.
I will take you up on that because I've been wanting to come out and see you anyway, so we may as well just put it
Oh,
all together in a single trip. That'd be great.
that'd be really exciting. It really is. Well, I've heard
Yeah,
nothing but wonderful things about Aqueduct Press, so I was really
yeah,
pleased to see your book was
yeah,
coming out from them. Yeah,
yeah.
have
I'm
a
very proud to be part of their stable of writers. I just am like over the moon.
that's great. I would too. Is there any excerpt you want to read to us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, let me read. Yeah, I'm going to read something from the story called Blood Tunnel. It's a very long story,
Hmm.
and it was published originally in like Water for Quarks, which was a collection of science fiction meets magical realism that I was invited to participate in, which was the first time I had ever been asked to read anything, which is super like flattering, right? And it involved there were some other writers I was really happy to be part of in that collection, like Jay Lake and Bruce Taylor and Kathleen Alkali, I think was in there. So it's really exciting to be part of this. So this was way back though, and I have to tell you, this was published in like 2000, I'm thinking 6 or something. And so the story that I wrote talks about a future kind of Civil War United States that has something to do with maybe some like religious fundamentalism.
Oh my.
Geez, does that sound familiar at all? I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, but this one takes a rather odd turn. I hope this doesn't really happen. Really don't. Really don't want this to happen. So I'm just going to give you a little setup from that. Um, Here we go. So it's a little more exposition, but it'll give you an idea where you're headed with the story. When the federal government collapsed into regional democracies the previous winter, the morality war in the East spread to Pacifica. Local majority sympathizers commandeered the fertile plateau of the former state of Washington to build New World churches and internment camps. Farming, reduced to subsistence efforts by survivalists, gave the star thistle, a pervasive, noxious weed, free range to multiply over neglected acreage. Then came the dirty drop in March. North of the Hanford Reservation, a Pacifica farm hiding horses for refugee transport was saturated by dirty bombs. Far worse than the massacre of horses was a radioactive byproduct of the explosives, which were packed with ceramic pellets of spent nuclear fuel designed to reheat and break down in the environment.
Wow.
While the sorry. Doo, 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 doo. While the intent to turn these locations hot and unlivable hadn't panned out, it was thought that the low-grade radiation, sorry, I have to scroll here, broadcast through the decay of those ceramic byproducts was what had accelerated the weeds' proliferation during this prime growing season. Pacific sympathizers had begun to carve tunnels through the vegetation, though their efforts came with a price. The spikes of the star thistle pierced even the toughest clothing and footwear. Workers came home bloody from head to toe. Some died of septic shock due to related infection. I'm just going to leave it there. This is a nice place
Oh,
to stop.
wow. Oh,
So, I must have had a really bad day with the weeds. And I'm like, oh, these star thistles are probably, it's not
yes.
even that. It's probably the stinging nettles because they get me every time. I can wear like full body armor and they're still going to get in there and
Oh,
bite me.
yeah. They're tough plants to do battle with,
They are.
for
They
sure.
are.
Well, thank you so much. That now you're going to have to me thinking about star thistles and those little pellets. Mm.
Ugh. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, talk about there being hope at the end. Um, one of the things you talk about and write about is disabilities. And we
Mhm.
both have significant disabilities. And I know that a number of my readers do too. So, hearing a little more about someone who's successfully written about that well, as in
Mm.
intention tremor, I think might help everybody. Can you just describe that book a little bit for us?
I would love to.
Right.
That book came out in 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic. So, gee, that's just not a great time to release a book. There's no bookstores, and poetry in particular really needs to be read out loud in front of people. So it was tough. I still sell books, so that was great. Yeah, Intention Tremor. Um, it started out, well, let's just go back to the very beginning. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2013. And I have some other neurological disorders, neurodivergent disorders, and multiple cases of arthritis. Because why just have one when you can have more than one, you know?
Yeah.
So thanks, mom and dad, for the genetics. That's where it comes from. So intention tremor ended up being, well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Moonpath Press for believing in this collection. And when Lana Ayres accepted it, she even said that the world needs this book. And I was just like, thank you for just being so kind. But, then other people would find it literally in like neurologist offices. People would buy it and leave it there. And
Yeah.
then they would reach out to me and say, thank you for writing this. And I mean, that is to me, that is it. That's why I do it. I'm not doing this because I want to be a famous poet. I'm not doing this for any of that. I write because I just, I want to make a positive change. So that's where that hope comes in, I guess. So Moonpath Press made that possible. So thank you, Lana. So this book, here, I'll show it to you. This is what it looks like. Intention Tremor. An intention tremor is a kind of tremor that happens not when you're just sitting still, but when you start to reach for something and then your hand tremors or maybe your leg tremors. I get both. And so I've dropped a lot of coffee cups, things like that.
Yes.
And it really sucks when you're like you're standing in line holding a bunch of books at a bookstore, then your arms are going like this because you're, trying to do the thing. So but the book itself is a collection of poems and prose and really brief essays and other kinds of writing. I don't even know what to call it. That center around the journey of getting a chronic illness diagnosis at later in life and then trying to figure out how to navigate that. So it was a chronicle of that. And I wrote it I didn't start out thinking, oh, I have an MS diagnosis, I'm going to write a book about it. I started just writing, poems just to like work through who am I now? Who am I? I have all these things happening in my body I have no control over, and having this fantastic introduction to our really broken healthcare system. It's its own kind of like Kafka-esque experience. Oh my gosh. So there's all these external and internal things that I'm trying to process, while I have teenagers at home and trying to, do some
Yeah.
work and all this other stuff. So it was a lot. So what do I do? What do a lot of people, creative people, do? They go and make art in some form. And so for me, it was poetry, and I would go camping and write around campfire, or I would take these long weekends. And I did a lot of work up in Port Townsend, Washington, which is a really beautiful place. If you ever come out here, I'm taking you there. You're gonna
I've
love it.
heard
You're gonna
so
love
much
it.
about it. Yeah.
It's a beautiful creative vortex is what it is. And I go to a writing conference there every year, and those people are like my second family. They're my kin. So the book is really a compilation. It started out as an abecedarian. So I had a poem for every letter in the alphabet, the title, right? And I pulled that off, and then I looked at him and like, this isn't right, because as you know, I'm also a prose writer, and I'm a journalist and always short story writer. And I just felt like this personal book of mine really needs to be a better reflection of who I am. And so I took some of the pieces that were poems, and I either got rid of them, and I didn't put them somewhere else. I didn't get rid of them, like destroyed them. I just didn't put them in my book. And instead I replaced them with short pieces of prose, that looked like all kinds of things. And I was so much happier with that. And I just felt like, it's just going to be this hybrid. It's going to be a hybrid of poetry and prose. And I don't really care if there's no spot for that on the shelf in the bookstore. I don't really care, because that's not what it's about. Again, it's about me being myself, sharing my experience, my journey, because I went looking for books like this myself, because I want to know how to get through that from someone else's experience. And thank God and bless every writer for having the nerves and the vulnerability to share their experience when they have a chronic illness, because those stories, they save lives. I'm not kidding. They save lives. So that's why I wrote it. I'm like, okay, maybe if I could just save one life, that would be great. And I feel like I have. So that's how I wrote it, and that's why I wrote it. The journey publishing was a nightmare because of the pandemic. So I had to set aside a lot of Zoom time, which I don't do great with. I mean, people think I do fine, but it's exhausting. Goes back to the sort of neurodivergent stuff going on with my head. Um, but I did it. I set up readings. I set up, interviews and panel discussions online. And now eventually I've been able to have some live readings. And they've all been just fantastic. I actually joined a group called this authors event network here in the region. And what we do is we go to odd places and sell books. We rent a table space like at the county fair,
Oh,
or at,
fun.
some kind of, different place where people are just gathering, and we sell books. And I sell tons of books there, and you just would never know. I mean, the last time I was at one of these events, it was in a military community where I'm just thinking, nobody there reads, the assumptions we make, right? Oh no, those people read poetry, but I'll do it. Okay. And it was this big festival right on the waterfront next to the Navy ships. And I'm like, I just feel like a fish out of water. And I sold more books than I did anywhere. It's, you just never know where you're going to find people. I met a couple of really fantastic veteran men in wheelchairs, and they were just like, thank you. And so it was delightful. It's so
Yeah.
delightful to meet your readers live like that. So it's been a really, like, I don't know, collage of different ways to just get my book out in front of people. Of course I use social media. Social media is kind of hit or miss. For me, it's really about having conversations like this and talking to people, and I've done a lot of podcasts. So gonna be hopefully doing that again with my new book. And then finally, the one thing that I'm really happy about is that I decided to donate 100% of, excuse me, 100% of my profits for the sale of Intention Tremor to an organization called the Accelerated Cure Project. They are a super cool nonprofit that works to take all the just scads and scads of MS research and all the things that are sort of even linked to what they do, and they put it all together. They're finding ways to combine it all in a way that can help researchers access the data they need in one spot so that they can save money by not replicating things that have already been done enough times. So giving them access to data so that they can start their own studies. And so it helps shorten the length of their research studies and also saves them a lot of money. So these are people down in the basement just crunching numbers and pulling in together all kinds of resources. And they are just hardworking, super cool people. They're there to help organize and advocate for people with multiple sclerosis, and so I give them all my money, and I've been able to write them a couple of nice checks out of the sales for my book. So I'm just super pleased. I feel like, mission accomplished, and I hope I keep doing it. And it's just gives me so much pleasure to be able to help them out. They're such an important organization. So,
Ah, well, that is a wonderful story. And I'll just add my little bit to that. I bought an
yeah.
extra copy of Intention to Tremor and gave it to my
Oh,
niece, who also has MS. And
oh, thank
she
you.
really loved it. And she told me that it gave her more courage to ask more questions from her doctors about, what's actually happening to her, because often I think we feel like a collection of symptoms when we walk into a doctor's office, and
Yes.
they don't necessarily have enough time to listen to it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's all
Mm-hmm.
important to us, and we may or may not understand exactly what's behind it, but we need some answers about how to deal
Mm-hmm.
with it. So she began to question her doctors more, and that, I think, really helped her. So
Oh,
yes,
good.
good work out there in the world, girl.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that is what it's all about. And I worked in healthcare inside the as a sleep technologist and sleep health educator for 10 years. And so I saw it from that point of view too. And I'm telling you that nobody knows anything. And the doctors are, often doing the best they can, but some of them are just so their hands are tied by insurance, which is such a horrible, horrible, it's criminal what's happening there. I feel super lucky because I have a neurologist that I just feel super listened to, and she has given me all the options, and they're not just two drugs. They're like, you can have any of these drugs if you want, or we can do this. We can just not do drugs at all, or we can do, supplements and vitamins, or we can do alternative like complementary medicine like massage therapy, or and on and on and on. And I know for a fact that most of my peers do not get even any of these options. So I feel super lucky. And so I want to speak from the rooftops that yeah, you have options and your doctor should be telling you about them. And if they're not, you should be asking and making them spend the time. I know that they're limited because of, requirements by, you know, uh,
This
what
is
is it?
medical insurance.
Medicare and things like that. But you have a right as a patient to demand those things. So I'm glad that it helped her. I really, it's so frustrating, but we really have to be our best advocates, and then also know how much we need to know for ourselves, because you can like really get depressed if you look too far, especially if you don't understand what you're reading. Um, so, find your own way is what I say. And this is how I found my way. I'm also someone, if you can't already tell, I'm kind of perennially sunny. I'm always,
None of
I
it.
got that from my mom. I'm just, there's just like this little fire of joy that's always inside me. That's kind of weird for some people to encounter. They're like, how could you be so happy? The world is going to hell in a basket. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I get it. And I'm not a Pollyanna, but I do think that there's reason to hope because there are people working for us, and that we also have choice in the world, even if we're stuck with a chronic illness or 10. we
Yes.
we have the way that we respond to it. And I know that you know this because you are an example for me.
Oh,
You have done so many things in your life. You guys, Glenda is awesome. And you're seriously one of the people. There's this small clutch of women in my life who I just feel like so grateful to have had you in my life, because you've given me guidance. You're funny and you're smart and you work hard and you really do the things you say you're going to do. I mean, all of your work with women's rights all through the years has been super inspiring to me. I mean, do you remember me calling you when George W. Bush was elected president, and I was like practically crying, like, "Oh my
Oh
God, George W. Bush is going to be president!" I was
gosh, I
so
hadn't thought about that in years.
I still remember that. And there you were, and you're so calm and with such grace said, Tamara, the pendulum doth swing the other way. And I was just like, there you go. There's the hope. That's the
It
hope
really does.
button
It
right
really
there.
does. Plus,
Yeah.
always said, my husband quotes me often, if you don't do politics, it gets done to you.
Yeah.
And we're
Oh,
living through having some of it done to us right now.
a
But
lot of it.
yeah, but we can work our way out of it. We have to work our way out of it. We really
They want us to be
want
sad
us to
and
be
curled up
hopeless.
into the fetal position and depressed, and that's how they're disabling the resistance, right?
Right.
That's how the patriarchy, that's what I'm going to call it, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what they want, is for the rest of us to give up because it's too hard. And you know what, screw that. I'm going to be happy because I do have some tools in my toolbox. Maybe I'm not going to be big and famous and have this huge influence in a huge way, but I can have it in a small way. I had an influence apparently over your niece. So I
Yes.
feel like if we all did that, if every single one of us did just that little bit, gosh, what a huge powerful force that would be.
Do what you can. It will make you feel
Do
more hopeful, is the way I look at it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it feels great. I mean, there's a dopamine hit that comes every time you get a note from someone who read your column. I used to write columns about living with MS, or, someone ringing you up and saying, "Hey, I read your book," or whatever. There's something that, I mean, that energy that comes from that can carry you for a year. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Indeed. I know. I always say I'm not going to do any more readings, and then I do them and people are nice and I go, wow, why don't I do
I
this?
know it. I'm in that spot right now. I'm like, I gotta put down intention tremor because I've got this new book, but I mean, I just did a whole thing last week and I'm going to be doing another thing in a couple of weeks. It doesn't matter. So, but
That's
I
good.
love reading. I love reading these poems. It's so much fun.
Ah, do you want to read us one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let me see. I have a couple of that are fan favorites. So, I'll read you this one because it's one of my favorites too. And I'm kind of in a snarky mood today. So let's read this one.
Oh, let's be snarky. Why not?
Let's be snarky because, it is a tool in the toolkit.
It is.
All right. So, when you're diagnosed with a chronic illness, what do we often do besides listening to our doctors, which we should be doing first and foremost, going to an actual real doctor, a real doctor, and getting advice. Okay, that's where we need to go. But what we all do without fail is we also go to see Dr. Google, right? And we go
Oh, yeah.
online,
Hmm.
and that can be good or bad. It depends on your health literacy or your mental or your media literacy, how well you can parse through what you encounter on the web. And as a journalist, I can tell you, people just do not have media literacy. So most people should not go online, but people do go online. And then there are people like me who go online to maybe subvert that and give you good information and call out the bad information and try to do that job. And then there are the people that just can't wait to go there and mess with people. And I'm telling you, it's so weird how I'm part of the group that manages a group called MS Unplugged, and it's a private, it's actually a secret group now in Facebook for people with MS. And how many thousands of accounts we had to get rid of, and so many of them where people would come in and there were just like predatory uh, around people with disability, trying to either sell them snake oil, trying to make them feel bad, trying to shame them, trying to blame them for their disease and so forth. They try to find their way into these groups and then you have to like kick them out again. It's awful. So anyway, this poem I'm going to read to you is called The Expert, and
Mm.
it's a prose poem. So this book has got, poems like you could see on the right there. But then I also have prose poems. I mean, poems meaning free verse, right?
Hmm.
But this is a prose poem. And everyone can relate to this, whether you have chronic illness or not. Let's just put it that way. Okay, The Expert. The expert sits online, overstimulated by blue spectrum light, scouring for evidence, though all he understands is purely anecdotal. The first person accounts, the stories from a friend of a sister's boyfriend's boss. He misinterprets clinical studies, decides 2 and 2 equal 5, wonders why science is taking so long to discover a capital C cure. He is not a biologist, but he might be a theologist. He does not know B cells from jail cells, from T cells, from killer cells, from supercells. He thinks the cure is known, locked in a cylinder in a vault in Antarctica where nobody will ever find it except through an act of espionage. He thinks sick people are the cash cows of the corporation, that vaccines are for fools, that medicine is poison, big pharma the enemy. But vitamins are miracles, even when they cost you your electric bill. And if you drank special water, ate special diets, performed special yoga poses, the gut biome would reverse itself and eliminate your dis-ease. Our web evangelizer believes you will fall for his friendly profile picture, the posts about his dogs, his misspelled words, and conspiracy theories posted at hours when only insomniacs breed. Who knows who he really is? To be sure, we could all stand to look in the mirror to see who we are and who we are not.
Hmm. Well, I think we all know that person. Sometimes it
Yes,
was us, but I'm gonna
yes, I
take
I,
up on.
I feel like it's super relatable, and I spend a lot of time in social media and in groups and whatever. So yeah,
Yeah, it's not hard to go down rabbit holes. They're named that for a reason, aren't they?
yes, yes, and that takes you kind of back to magical realism almost. That's fantasy, but Alice in Wonderland is all.
Yeah. Well, maybe the conspiracy theorists should spend more time writing science fiction. I don't know. Perhaps
all that creative problem
all that
solving in their
energy.
heads could be used to it's just like hackers. I mean, all that skill and talent, it could be used for good, but yeah, they're gonna choose to go the other way. It's
Hmm.
unfortunate.
That's funny because the novel that I'm writing now which is now has a title Chocolate and Roses on Armitage because it's set in Chicago. Um,
Oh yeah.
and is sort of a romance, but what I call an offbeat romance is all about those odd people that we all know and encounter daily and make assumptions about. Sometimes maybe we're right and sometimes we're very wrong. And
Hmm.
sometimes, oddly enough, they fall in love with each other, as happens in this book.
Oh, I love that.
But
I
they're
love
not
that.
so
That's
sure how to let each other know that. So they need a lot of help from their
oh, I
friends.
love that.
It's
Being
a
different is
fun book.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. That's so funny. Not that I would have a romance with this particular individual, but there is this man who lives in our community. I'm pretty sure he's unhoused. You can find him on his bicycle and he carries a lot of things on his bike with him. He's an older gentleman and I call him the Fisher King
Hmm.
because he's got this kind of Fisher, if you saw that movie and, just
Yeah.
imagine this sort of vagabondish older gentleman who has seen the world. He's seen the world, and he's got this cool beard and these eyes. I mean, I've had conversations with him because our little town, we do a lot of the small local businesses have space for unhoused people to come and get coffee and water and stuff, which I'm very proud of that about where I live. And so Fisher King, he'll show up at one of my favorite coffee places and sit down, and he'll start talking to you even if you're not interested in talking to him,
Hmm.
but he'll tell you all these stories, and then I just think, gosh, I really want to one day just sit down and just hang out with this guy all day and just hear his stories. And I'm not scared of him. I mean, I think he's got so much. I'm not sure if he could tell his stories, but I would love to know them anyway. And he'll show you some kind of he has a document that he'll show you and it's maybe a certificate of something, and it's not what he says it is. It's something else. But
Yes.
to him, it's like something major, at like a
An
major award or
artifact for
something.
him. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and it's super important to him. And so, I mean, he's really trying to reach out and show people that he matters. And of course, he matters. I see him. He gives me a smile every time I see him because he's very, very cheerful, and he's just riding around on his bike, and he's just super kind. He's really kind, blue eyes. And so, I don't know. One of these days, maybe I'll see him outside and we'll go just hang out. There's a beautiful park down at the waterfront. And just go, hey, let's go down here, and I'll buy you a coffee, and you can just tell me your stories.
Well, you can try. I have a
I
brother-in-law who
could.
does that, who is himself neurodivergent. And he just, if he sees someone interesting, he just talks to them and tries to find out what their story is. He often
Yeah.
takes photographs and makes art out of it as well. But yeah,
Oh, I love that.
I admire that about him. I really do. I tend to just watch people and not necessarily engage with them very much because I find them interesting. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, there are a lot of people in the world who are wired differently
Absolutely.
in so many more
Absolutely.
ways than we can presently describe, I think. And
Yeah.
it does seem like a fair number of them are in my family, but nonetheless, um, they fascinate me. But what fascinates me more is how we treat them and how we engage
Mm-hmm.
or don't.
Yeah. Or
So,
don't. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's part of what I've been trying to write about. The love story keeps intervening.
Well, it means it wants to be told. And so,
Oh, yeah.
you got to do it. And I
The
love
love
that
story is
idea.
important. It's
Yeah. I don't know. Romance is really hitting a new stride right now. There's so much new kinds of romance out there. People are writing, and more men are writing romance, and it's not
yes.
erotica. It's straight up, it's romance. And
Hmm.
I'm loving that. I mean, we're I think we're just in this weird, I mean, of course we are in this weird, interesting times, as they say. We all live in interesting times, and some people are tired of living in the interesting times. I kind of feel like it's about damn time we live in these interesting times, and we don't want to go back to the old ways, because the old ways didn't serve anybody but, the people in charge. And we need to change that from the bottom up. So yeah, I love that genre itself in writing is changing, and there are more points of view, more viewpoints,
Hmm.
more ideas about what a genre is supposed to look like. And then all this mishmash of genres, you've got like horror and romance, you've got romantasy, you've got neo noir, which is like Ozark, if you're watching TV, Ozark and
Hmm.
Fargo or neo noir,
Yeah.
all these different new ways of telling story. And all ultimately, it all comes down, no matter what media, it's all about storytelling. It's all about telling the
Yes.
human story, the human condition, however we can, and from whatever lens we are most comfortable, viewing it through. So
Hmm. Well, I admire that about you, that you have a variety of lenses that you can use and that you can write so many different kinds of things. As a matter of fact, I remember um, when you hadn't written any poetry and you
yeah.
said, I'm going to learn how to write poetry, and you just did it.
Oh,
And
it's
very successfully.
thank you. It's really interesting because, yes, you met me, and the only poetry back then that I'd ever written was back in high school and college. So, because I had to.
Yes.
And then I moved to Seattle, or to Bainbridge Island, and this is like a full circle moment for me. Last weekend I was at a friend's memorial. Her name was Marit, and I read some poems at her send off. And
Gift.
it was really interesting because I took a workshop when I first moved here from a man named John Wilson. And that's where I met Marit, was in John Wilson's workshop. And John was there, okay, on Saturday. And it's really interesting because I met her at a solstice bonfire, and that was kind of what was happening with her memorials. There was a bonfire, so it was like a full circle moment then, but also just this idea that, wow, I entered this whole union of people, not being a poet at all. And here I am with the grandmaster person who I really learned to appreciate and respect poetry from, John Wilson, standing right here. And he also read poems, and it was just like, it was amazing. And it's funny because I haven't for the longest time really identified as a poet. And now I'm like, yeah, I just write all the things. And my first love will always be prose. I've been writing short stories since I was like 5. But poetry came later, but it just, I don't know what to say about it except that it just happens. It's just something that just is a compulsion almost. And maybe it's something that I need to just do to empty my head because I've got so many things going on in there, and the words just collide in ways that seem to need to be on the page. And then I turn them into poems or whatever they want to be. Actually, sometimes we'll take an idea and I'll just like let it tell me what it wants to be rather than try to force a square peg into a round hole and turn. I've done that enough times. I mean, I've taken novels and pulled things out and found those were poems, and you know, just let the thing be what it wants to be instead of, and I think that's just a good rule of thumb just for living your life is, be the thing you want to be.
Well, I suppose that you have to learn how to write a specific genre before you can break the constraints, maybe, but maybe not. My journey was the opposite. I was a poet for so many years and wrote some essays.
Yes.
Never successfully wrote a short story. And then the first one that I wrote and sent out, it didn't win a very major prize, just a little teensy, finalist. But I thought, oh,
That's
well, okay, maybe I can do that. But I will say this for the benefit of those out there who want to mix genres and don't think so much that they can do that, is that what made me think I could write a novel was when I read the first 3 pages of The Prince of Tides by Pat Conroy. I read
mm-hmm,
that and I thought, this is a poem. This is poetry.
mm-hmm,
Oh, I
mm-hmm.
didn't know we could do that. you know?
Yes,
So,
that's it.
yeah.
Yes.
So many things, much of my writing begins as a poem. And sometimes it kind of fights that constraint and makes its way into a story or a novel in some
Yeah.
cases. But yes, so
Yeah.
fight the genre.
Yeah, it's funny. I love that. I think I read Louise Erdrich's The Beat Queen,
Mhm,
and that was my first real conscious introduction to magical realism.
mhm.
And that was before. So your listeners probably don't know, I used to run a magazine called Margin, which
Yes.
was nothing but magical realism. I did that for 10 years. And the beginnings of that came from reading The Beat Queen.
Hmm.
And I realized I could write this kind of reality, and it made perfect sense to me. It was beautiful. It While also being super powerful, it had a political subtext to it, but it was not didactic. It was gorgeous and like fed my soul, right? And so I started looking into what that meant. What is magical realism? Someone tells me what it is. I'm like, I've never even heard of that. And so, of course, I went to Gabriel Garcia Marquez and, a ton of other people, and then realized I'd already read some because I was a big fan of Kafka already. And Kafka is nothing if not a magical realist. But I read so many kinds of different, kinds of writing from around the world that captures the magical realist approach or point of view, or anyway. And so that's how I learned how to do it, but it started with that one book. Yeah, I mean, it just takes, I remember really reading that first, I still think of it, that first paragraph, if I recall, is about a woman walking into a space from being outside in the super cold weather. And um
Yeah.
yeah, so it was just so compelling that I actually have a poem in which I say, I can't read Louise Erdrich in the winter because her winters are so damn
Oh,
cold.
yes. Oh, yes. I
Anyway,
remember
that's
that,
the little
yeah.
side shoot, but authors that sort of, I was meant to read her in that moment of my life in that time before I had kids, and this whole thing blossomed. And then I started a magazine with 2 children in diapers because I'm just so, sensible that way.
Well, I loved Margin. I was sorry to see it go, though I understand sometimes You
It
finish a
was
chapter in your life and it's just time to move on.
yeah, yeah. It's still out there. I mean, and it's still getting what do you call it? My hand, I don't know why my hand is raised. Okay. I have my hand raised on my screen. That's weird.
Well, that's
Um
good because I was ignoring it.
no, no, no. Um no, what I was gonna say was I think I just lost my thread there. Oh well, anyway.
Something about chapters, going to another chapter in your life. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and
Just
sometimes it does start with reading. I mean, just reading,
yeah.
it's a good argument for reading broadly, I think.
Absolutely. I totally recognize that, and I'm in a class right now with Richard Thomas. He's in Chicago. It's called Contemporary Dark Fiction. And he's having us read across and constantly pushing that, agenda really of just read everything. Don't just read what you're writing, read everything. Because you're going to learn something from all of it. You're going to learn from reading a script because you're going to learn about dialogue. You're
Mhm,
going to learn about reading from reading a play because you're going to look at, staging. You're
mhm,
going to see how that is interpreted. You're going to read, you're going to learn from poetry. If you're a novelist, you should definitely become a poet so that you practice poetry, even if it's not very good, right? So
mhm.
that
You can
it
learn.
shows up as writing concisely and
Mhm.
picking the right words. And because every word has to count, even in a novel, not just in poetry,
Yes.
and so forth and so on. Journalism, you have to check your facts and you have to make sure that you can be as objective as possible when you're doing your research. You know what I mean? So it all counts.
Indeed, it does. I hate to end this. It's been so
I
much,
know.
but I know that we need to do it and let you get on to other things. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well,
And
thank you so much
everybody
for
out
having
there,
me.
you want to
You
read
guys
this?
know that Glenda and I are just having this conversation, and then we're just recording it for you. But we've been meaning to have this conversation forever.
It's true.
So this is what we would be talking about, even if it wasn't going to be recorded. So
So maybe we've got to do it again. I'd like to actually have another conversation with you about
yeah.
self-promotion because I think that we all know
Okay.
more than we think about it. And I
Mm,
think you're very good at social media. So that's what I
that's
see
awesome.
anyway. So a
Oh,
lot of us
well,
like to learn what you know. And
well,
so,
it changes because everything changes, and so it's always kind of a learning curve. But just yeah, that would be a good conversation to have at another time. And I'm going to be doing
yes.
plenty of that. Of course, Aqueduct Press will be doing its fair share of promotion, but I'll always be self-promoting. That's just what I do.
We
I
all have
want people
to.
to read my books. So
And I know they will. I know they will. I'm first in line for the pre-order.
oh, thank
So
you. Thank you.
be
You're gonna
sure
love it. You're
that,
gonna love it.
oh, I know I am. When you get that link, be sure and send it to us and we'll stick it in
I
our
will.
newsletter so everybody will know how to pre-order for you. Pre-orders are really, really important. That
Yes, they
determines
are.
that determines how many copies get printed, folks. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
order those
Mm-hmm.
copies early for Tamara and for everyone. Okay.
Yay. Thank you for that. Yes,
Thank you so much,
absolutely.
Tamara. Let's talk
Thank
again
you.
soon. Okay.